Welcome to another edition of The Things That Matter. I'm Gary Sutton alongside of Charlie Giroux, who's running for governor here on the Republican ticket in Pennsylvania. And Charlie, every week we come up with a word that we want to use as kind of the basis for our conversation. This week, the word is reality. Yeah, some people aren't quite sure about that sometimes, but we're going to talk about that a little bit this morning. And Charlie, in a week where we really saw reality come home on the international scale with Ukraine invading, or Russia invading Ukraine rather, reality has really come home here for us in terms of some of the leadership and some of the things that are going on when we see the president of Ukraine turning down a chance to get out of the country saying, I don't need a ride, I need ammunition.
I need some ammo.
I mean, we're seeing some true leadership in times of real reality right now.
And we need leadership in times of reality, Gary. And one of the things that I say consistently in this campaign is I live on Reality Ranch because we get so much, shall we say, BS that flows. And unfortunately, Gary, one of the problems that I see is that because people hear so much of that nonsense, the non-reality of life, that they tend to just tune it all out. So that when you are telling the truth, people say, yeah, okay. And it becomes very difficult. It really does, because there is reality, there is objective truth, and there is nonsense and non-truth.
Charlie, you and I have talked a million times before on my radio program and so forth, but I kind of divide people into politicians and policy doers, people who want to serve in our representative democracy. And to me, I wrote a little quote down this morning. We have politicians who want to create their own reality for themselves and leaders who deal with reality with the best interests of people in mind. Policymakers are leaders who deal with the reality that's in front of them. I was struck by that this week as I listened to the State of the Union address, and I wondered if reality was someplace where our president was, respectfully, at that particular point, because the things he was telling us were things that, are you going to believe your lying eyes and ears? Are you going to believe what I'm telling you? And people are dealing with reality every day. I just saw today where people are paying $385 more per month right now in inflation than they were on products a year ago. That's reality. And it seems like we have a lot of people who are trying to create their own reality for people when people really know what it is already.
Well, the problem for those who try to create their own reality is that everybody else sees what is real. And when they sit down at their breakfast table, their dinner table, or whatever to figure out their family budget, they're like, all the rhetoric in the world doesn't mean a thing because the numbers either add up or they don't. The facts don't lie. Politicians may. But when you get into that demagogic nonsense that so many politicos try to feed us, it really is a problem for folks because they try to sort out what's actual and what isn't, but they always come up with the truth. I mean, people know in some ways instinctively, but as soon as they scrape away the surface a little bit, they get to the facts and they know.
You and I are both coaches. We're both basketball fans. We're getting into March Madness right now. Greatest time of the year as far as I'm concerned as far as basketball.
No question.
But when you talk about reality, we understand what's on the scoreboard at the end. It says one team won, one team lost. Doesn't mean you're bad or good. It's just one team won, one team lost. Unfortunately, we look at people who don't look at a scoreboard very well right now that are politicians and say, well, my team's down 30, but I have an agenda, it's going to work. You know, the other night, President Biden's talking and saying, well, you know, things are kind of bad right now. I know you're living paycheck to paycheck, but if we just pass my program, everything's going to be good. That agenda hasn't worked so far in the last 13 months, and people know it, and yet at the same time, you have a guy who's coaching like he's 30 down saying everything's still working.
Well, they used to say that the definition of insanity was doing the same things over and over again and hoping for a different result. And that's unfortunately what we're getting from the Biden administration is a lot more happy talk and really doubling down on failed policies when folks who have to live with those policies realize every day that the cost of everything is going through the roof. If you go to the gas pump, you're in sticker shock. If you go to the grocery store, and if you can even find what you're looking for, you're paying exponentially more than you did a year ago. If you go anywhere right now and try to get goods and services, I mean, our shelves look like a third world country.
Charlie, as a guy who's running for governor right now, how do you stay away from that idea of, well, here's my agenda. I'm a conservative, I'm a Republican, I've got these things, I have principles I'm standing on, and yet at the same time, be adaptable to the kind of reality that people are having to face every single day?
Well, I think you have to look at what is really going on. That's reality.
Yes.
And confront it, not pretend that it doesn't exist. And if you look at reality and say, here are the problems we face, here are the logical solutions to those problems, here are the kind of next step solutions to those problems, things that people may not have thought of in particular ways already, and take those things and present them to people. Let them make up their minds as to whether or not those things will work. Let them make up their minds as to whether or not they believe you. And I think that is what our campaign is all about.
When you're going around Pennsylvania, you just got back from CPAC down in Orlando. I'm sure you talked to a lot of people there nationally, but statewide, as you're going around, what are some of the biggest realities that people are talking to you about right now? Obviously, the economy is a big one, but maybe getting inside that a little bit.
Well, getting inside the economy, it's the price of everything, Gary. I mean, it's whether it's gasoline or home heating or food or any other commodity. That's what people are really concerned about now, is that inflation's going through the roof and they're having a hard time making ends meet. And then they look at a state government that's saying, well, let's spend exponentially more next year, a gigantic increase in the state budget, which means ultimately that government's hand is coming deeper into our pocketbooks and into our pockets. And that really causes people to say, whoa, that's the reality I'm seeing on the economic side. I continue to hear from folks all across Pennsylvania deep concerns about election integrity. I spoke on that down at CPAC.
Right.
And Gary, I've said it so many times, I'm almost tired of hearing myself say it. But if we can't trust the results, then there really aren't any winners. And so we've got to get to a place where people trust our electoral process, where the votes that are being cast are those that should properly be cast, and the votes that are cast are then properly counted. And if we can do that, we can get back to a reality where people believe that what happened was real.
Reality is the truth. I mean, whether we like it or not, there is a reality, there is a truth out there. And I think one of the things that people are really thirsting for right now is to get truth from their leaders. And they're not getting that. The way, at least the perception is, they're not getting that. And the reality, we can see from some of the policies that are being practiced, they're not getting that either. How do you change that,
No,
Charlie?
and they get empty promises.
Yeah.
And they've heard all that stuff before.
And platitudes.
And platitudes. And I'm really trying in this campaign, Gary, to do two things. One, to always tell the truth.
Right.
And that's something that we've told every person on our staff consistently throughout the campaign, is we always tell the truth. We're not going to shade this. We're not going to make this a little bit off center. We're going to tell the truth. Look people in the eye, and even if they don't like what we have to say, we're going to tell the truth. But then the second thing is that the public policy pronouncements that we make aren't going to be demagogic. They're not going to be quick fix solutions, because people know that it takes real serious work to solve some of the problems we have. We've got candidates out there saying, I'm going to give you a 0% corporate net income tax. I'm going to give you a 0% personal income tax.
Right. Not going to happen.
But if it does, you're going to be getting nailed with taxes somewhere else.
Right.
And that's reality. I'm a great believer that we should get rid of the personal property tax. Have been for years. But if you're going to get rid of the school property tax, what do you replace it with? You can't just say, oh, we're going to get rid of the school property. Oh, wow, isn't that great? But that's pie in the sky,
Right.
and nobody believes that that's going to happen in a vacuum. There's going to be a burden shift, and we've got to be honest enough to tell people that. So I'm working very diligently with a lot of different people whom I respect to come up with a burden shift that isn't an increase in the burden.
So it's not a shilling for votes. It's most Americans, most Pennsylvanians are willing to listen to reality. If someone's got a plan and says, okay, we're willing to put the nose to the grindstone and go to work on this, but they want to know that you're doing it together. I was struck the other night as I watched the State of the Union address at all the congressmen and women and senators who were there, and the president and obviously the people behind him, who were there without masks. Now, I just got done riding the rail train, the auto train, down to Orlando, Florida, Sanford, Florida, last week. And the whole way down, the whole way back, we were badgered by this idea we had to keep our mask on for 17 straight hours because we were on federal property, on a federal train that was going down there. And yet I watched people who were on the biggest federal property the other night, the Capitol, being hypocritical and sitting there doing that. And I'm thinking, therein lies a great problem. It's a small little parallel, but it's a great problem. Do as I tell you to do, don't do as we're doing.
Well, Gary, we see that all over the place, too.
Right.
And these are the elites who unfortunately have become a ruling class, something our founders never imagined would happen here in
Right.
our great republic. They think they're smarter than we are. They even think they're more righteous than we are. And they certainly think that they know better for us as to how we should behave. And I'm one that's going to get rid of that political elite and the ruling class and get back to from the people, for the people, governance. Because you see the hypocrisy, and you used the word properly, all over the place. I mean, you saw these members of Congress with no mask, with a bunch of school children. You know, they've all got their masks on, but the member doesn't. And then you saw it on the floor of the United States Congress the other night.
The hypocrisy has gotten so thick, and the reality is that people are sick and tired of it. And again, from the people, for the people, people say, well, that's a great motto, but how do you live that out? What do you do every day to kind of live that out as a guy running for governor, as a guy who hopefully eventually is going to be the governor?
Well, again, you tell the truth.
Yeah.
You look people in the eye and give them exactly what you believe or understand the world's reality to be. You tell them about the problems. You tell them about the solutions. The difficulty, Gary, is that we don't always have this opportunity with voters.
Right.
A lot of these 30-second boom, 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 boom nonsense that we get with these scripted, paid-for commercials that really don't say anything at their heart.
No.
Don't allow us to get into this kind of a conversation. But when we can have these types of chats, people, A, are smart enough to understand, B, are bright enough to act on it, and C, will always do what they believe is in the best interest of them and their families. And that makes a better society.
And here's some reality. You can go back to charlieforgovernor.com and check all these out that we talk about and say, there's what you said, and come back and say that to Charlie later on. You know, one of the problems, though, is people are sitting there right now saying, okay, Charlie, that all sounds good, from the people, for the people, but then you run into the bureaucracy once you get there. Unelected people who are making all kinds of rules, who are getting in our way, who are making life much tougher for people through regulations and everything else. How do you deal with those people as governor?
Well, you deal with it in a couple of ways. One, you set a culture, because the governor is the person that does that
Right.
across state government. And people react to that. I mean, bureaucrats want to stay where they are. They want to keep their bosses happy. And then you put bosses in place that will reinforce that culture. You get the best secretaries for every department. You get the best folks that you have the power to appoint. Obviously, you can't appoint everybody across the bureaucracy. But to the extent that you can, you bring in people that are committed to governing in the way that you want to see things governed.
As governor, people are going to ask, how would you deal with a couple different things? I'm going to do a little shotgun with you right now, or machine gun, I guess you should say, because shotgun would take longer to load. COVID. What would you do with COVID?
Well, I think Ron DeSantis gave us a much better model than Tom Wolf ever could conceive, and I think that pretty well says it all. Individual liberty, individual freedom, great information coming to people, and all options being on the table, but having them there as options.
Inflation. What do you do as governor to try to tackle inflation?
Well, obviously, inflation is largely a federal problem,
Right.
but here at home, the governor can do several things. One, not overtax people. Two, by so doing, allow people to keep more of what they earn and decide for themselves how that money is spent. That ultimately has a very positive impact on the economy largely. Pennsylvania is a big part of America's economy.
How about energy?
Well, as you know, I'm a great believer in Pennsylvania energy. I am a pro-energy advocate. Obviously, I've made it very clear that I am pro-natural gas, but I'm also pro-coal. I'm also pro-solar. I'm also pro-wind. I'm also pro-nuclear. I'm in favor of any form of energy that Pennsylvania can develop, because that makes us energy independent, energy self-sufficient, allows us to be an exporter of energy, and helps not only our economy and job creation, but helps our national security as well.
Obviously, the legislature has something to do with this, but taxation for large and small businesses.
We've got to lower our business taxes, Gary. Even Tom Wolf, in a fit of lucidity, has said that our business taxes are too high.
Right.
But you've got a Republican General Assembly and a Democrat governor who agree that the business taxes are too high. And what's been done?
Nothing.
In 25 years. So I will put my shoulder to the wheel to get our business taxes lower so that Pennsylvania can be competitive again.
And finally, property taxes.
Well, we've got to get rid of the personal property tax. The question obviously becomes, what will you replace it with? And that's what I'm working on very hard right now, to come up with a realistic plan that people can believe, can support, and can promote without having to worry about some shell game being played with them later on.
Lots of reality to deal with as a gubernatorial candidate and as a governor. And you can deal with the reality by, again, going to charlieforgovernor.com and check back on these things that matter, or you could make a certain call.
It wouldn't be the best time with Gary Sutton if we didn't say
Right.
717-877-8194. 717-877-8194. It's my personal cell number. Please feel free to call me. If you've got something you want to ask about, tell me about, a thought you'd like to offer, something you'd like to see state government doing, or something you'd just like to yell and scream about, please feel free to call. And Gary will also take orders for pizza.
That's exactly right. Anyway, that's the number I've called a few times, and he always answers. So there you go. I can tell you the reality is you'll get Charlie Giroux on the other end. Thanks so much for joining us this time for The Things That Matter. I'm Gary Sutton. Charlie Giroux is running for governor. Check him out at charlieforgovernor.com.
Businessman, conservative, patriot, Charlie Giroux for governor.